Page 6, measles, once dead in this country, has now been brought back to life with a vengeance. There are now 102 reported cases of measles in 14 states. More than 90 of those are in California. Now, for the past 15 years, measles had been all but eliminated in the U.S. So why the sudden surge in cases? Could it be that we are allowing people into this country from other countries who are not being screened? It's common sense. But then again, so is getting children vaccinated for measles.
A small but growing number of people have not been vaccinated. That number is building up among young adults and adults in society, and that makes us vulnerable. We have to make sure that measles doesn't get a foothold in the U.S. It's been actually eliminated from this country for 15 years. All of our cases result ultimately from individuals who've traveled and brought it back here. We have to stop it from getting a foothold here. Overall, we have a 92% vaccination rate in this country, and even among those parents whose kids have not been vaccinated, most of them don't have that deeply held concern. They just may not recognize that measles is still with us, that it's serious, and that not getting your kid vaccinated is not only a risk for your own kid, but puts other vulnerable kids in your community at risk.
Now, some doctors, pediatricians, are not treating children who are not vaccinated. Can you blame them? This is how disease is spread. And securing our southern border would ensure that people with diseases like measles and TB don't get in. It's common sense, right? Meantime, more common sense is being rejected by Team Obama and the Democrats, chief among them, the Keystone XL pipeline. Joining me now, author, speaker, strategic consultant, and Daily Ledger contributor T.J. O'Hara. T.J., it seems rational to me that we would embark on a program such as, and approve a program such as the Keystone XL pipeline, but what is not rational to me are some of these proposed amendments we've seen flying through the Senate trying to be attached to the Keystone XL pipeline.
Absolutely. You have a senator from Michigan. Debbie Stabenow is the way her name is pronounced, but when you look at her amendment, which had to do with the post office, you might think it was pronounced stupid now. I mean, it's incredible. We've taken these commitments not to have pork in our legislature anymore, but what we're doing is attaching ridiculous amendments. So you take a look at what she's doing. The post office loses $1 billion, $2 billion every year. And we've been trying to sort that out for decades. Since 2012, they've been doing a restructuring. 141 facilities have been closed, about 7,000 jobs have been discarded, and yet there's been no drop-off in the effectiveness of the mail. So what she wants to do is delay the rationalization of facilities for another 2 years. And when you look at that, you say, what does that have to do with the Keystone Pipeline? In effect, she's either, my best guess would be, she's either tying it to a union base that perhaps funded her election process, or perhaps she thinks maybe we can just, mail Canadian oil down to the Gulf. Who can tell?
Well, I think even Benjamin Franklin would agree that it is time for our federal government to get out of the business of moving packages and letters when the private sector clearly can do it better and cheaper. I was doing a lot of mailing over the holidays. I don't know about you, but I was walking into one of those, mail-in-a-box places down the corner, and every time I went in there, it was twice as expensive to use the U.S. Postal Service versus FedEx or UPS. It's a no-brainer. We need to get out of this business, either that or somehow figure out a way to cut the pork.
Well, you need an amendment because it's actually in Article 1, Section 8 that says it is our responsibility to have post offices and postal routes. But beyond that, nothing says we have to be inefficient.
No, exactly. Now, another inefficient area of our government is the IRS, and I think that we've come across yet another reason to take several sticks of dynamite to the tax code, light the fuse, put on the ground, and run away, and then start over.
Well, there's a more interesting story. It doesn't have anything to do with the tax code, but it has to do with the effectiveness and efficiency of the IRS. There's a 94-year-old man in Ohio that's been trying to file his tax returns, and the IRS has rejected it. What's interesting is why they've rejected it. The IRS has him in its computer base as being dead. They attributed that to the Social Security Administration, which, when the family went to the Social Security Administration, Social Security said, no, he's alive. It doesn't say anything like that. It's just that their computer base doesn't interact with ours properly. So it gets stranger when you find out that the individual actually appeared before the IRS in person to suggest that he was in fact alive, and they refused to accept that as compelling evidence. So, you know, looking forward, you kind of wonder at 94, are they going to be so solid in their commitment to the fact that he's dead in their records to deny him Obamacare? And if so, will you at least have the benefit of voting as a Democrat in Chicago?
Several times over, I'm sure. Well, you know, they'll be going after his death taxes for sure. Speaking of voting as a Democrat, I understand I can get a DNC card if I pay X amount of monies, and this DNC little card-carrying member of the DNC has a little picture of Obama on it?
Well, it all started just after the State of the Union, and Barack and Joe sent me personal notes, and I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but they email me on a personal basis so frequently. I think we're pretty tight as friends. Yeah. And they began shortly after the State of the Union soliciting people to make donations up from $3 like they used to ask, starting at $10 and going up to $200 to become card-carrying members of the DNC. Now, what's interesting, voter ID cards are discriminatory and racist.
Yes.
And yet now the DNC has a card that if you pay, you can be a card-carrying member of the DNC. Otherwise, you can't be. Now, the other thing I will say that they broke up those emails with some other ones that were soliciting donations, or not donations, but soliciting me to buy T-shirts and magnets, which capitalized on the president's flippant remark during the State of the Union. And in effect, the logos on these things say, "We won both of them," in reference to the elections. Now, I think it's about time the RNC hires somebody like me to run a counter campaign where we have T-shirts and magnets that just say something like, "So he fooled you twice."
So, speaking of that, how much money did you give Joe and Barack? Anything at all, or did you hit delete?
You know, I am such a strong friend of theirs, I think they'll probably just send me one without a donation.
Checks in the mail. Thanks, TJ.
You're welcome.